The spaceship, New Horizon, moved slowly through the dark space toward a strange new world. Captain Lisa Monroe stood at the big window and looked at the planet getting bigger in front of them. This world was called Cathara, and it was home to a scary race of alien hunters. Lisa felt nervous but excited. This was her first time leading a peace mission to meet aliens. The Earth government had chosen her team very carefully. They wanted to make friends with the Cathara people and learn about their culture. Dr. Jake Sullivan sat at his desk reading files about the Cathara. He was the team's expert on alien life. The pictures in his files showed creatures that looked like giant cats. They had golden fur, sharp teeth, and claws that could cut through metal. Jake had studied many alien races before, but the Cathara were different. They were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors who loved to fight. "Captain," called out pilot Tony Green from his seat, "we will reach their planet in 2 hours." Lisa nodded and walked over to where Ambassador Claire Peterson was sitting. Claire was reading her own files about Cathara politics and customs. She would be the one to speak for all humans during the meetings. "Are you ready for this?" Lisa asked her friend. Claire looked up and smiled, but Lisa could see worry in her eyes. As ready as anyone can be when meeting aliens who think fighting is the most important thing in life. The file said that Cathara children started learning to fight as soon as they could walk. Their schools only taught about war, hunting, and survival. They did not have art, music, or stories like humans did. The Cathara thought such things were useless and made people weak. Dr. Jake Sullivan came over to join them. "I have been reading about their family life," he said. "Cathara parents are very proud when their cubs show fighting spirit. They believe that only the strongest deserve to live good lives." Engineer Ben Parker looked up from his computer. "Their technology is impressive," he said. "They build the best weapons and armor in the galaxy, but they do not seem interested in science or exploration like we are." Dr. Kate Williams, who studied different cultures, was reading about Cathara history. "They have been fighting wars for thousands of years," she explained. "Every story they tell is about great battles and brave warriors. They do not understand why other aliens want peace instead of glory in combat." Lisa walked back to the window. The planet Cathara was now close enough to see its surface. It looked rough and wild with tall mountains and deep forests. She could see big cities made of dark stone, built like fortresses ready for war. "Communication, coming in from the planet," announced Communications Officer Lisa Hayes. "The Cathara are telling us where to land our ship." The voice that came through the speakers was deep and rough. It spoke in the Cathara language, which sounded like growling and snarling. The computer translated the words into English. "Human vessel, you will land at the military spaceport outside the capital city. Our warriors will meet you there. Do not bring weapons. Do not show fear. Fear is weakness, and we do not respect the weak." Claire took a deep breath. "Well, that was friendly," she said with a nervous laugh. As their ship entered the planet's atmosphere, they could see more details of the Cathara world. The buildings were huge and made of black stone. Tall towers with sharp points reached toward the sky. Everything looked like it was built for war, not comfort. "Look at those structures," said Ben, pointing at some buildings near the landing area. "They are training grounds. I can see young Cathara practicing combat moves." Through the ship's cameras, they watched hundreds of young aliens running, jumping, and fighting. Even the smallest ones, who looked like children, were learning to use claws and teeth as weapons. It was both amazing and frightening to see. The ship landed with a soft bump on the stone landing pad. Through the windows, they could see a group of adult Cathara waiting for them. These aliens were huge, much bigger than any human. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, and their muscular bodies were covered in thick fur. Their eyes glowed like fire in the dim light. "Remember," Claire said to the team, "we are here to make friends, not enemies. We need to show them that humans can be valuable allies, even if we are different from them." Dr. Kate Williams gathered her research materials. "I have learned some of their customs," she said. "We should not look directly into their eyes for too long. They see that as a challenge to fight, and we should not smile too much. They think showing teeth is a threat." Jake checked his medical scanner one more time. "Their bodies are much stronger than ours," he warned. "Even their children could probably hurt us badly if they wanted to. We need to be very careful." Lisa put on her captain's uniform and made sure her team was ready. "This is it, everyone. We are about to meet one of the most dangerous races in the galaxy. But we are here to prove that humans deserve respect too, even if we solve problems differently than they do." The ship's door opened with a hiss, and hot air rushed in from outside. It smelled wild and sharp like a forest full of predators. Lisa led her team down the ramp toward the waiting Cathara warriors. The aliens watched them with bright yellow eyes that seemed to judge every movement. Lisa could feel their gaze measuring her strength and finding her small and weak. But she kept walking forward, knowing that this meeting could change the future for both their species. As they approached the Cathara group, Lisa realized that making peace with these proud warriors would be much harder than anyone on Earth had imagined. The Great Hall of Claws was the biggest building Lisa Monroe had ever seen. The walls were made of black stone and covered with weapons from ancient battles. Huge banners hung from the ceiling, each one telling the story of a famous Cathara victory. The floor was so polished that Lisa could see her reflection in it. High Warrior Zexthor sat on a massive throne made from the bones of some giant creature. He was the largest Kithra Lisa had ever seen, with golden fur that seemed to glow in the dim light. His amber eyes watched the human visitors like a hunter studying his prey. Ambassador Claire Peterson walked forward slowly, trying not to show her fear. Behind her, Dr. Jake Sullivan, Dr. Kate Williams, Engineer Ben Parker, and Captain Lisa Monroe followed in a line. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the huge room. Around the throne stood other Cathara warriors, each one bigger and stronger looking than the last. They wore armor made of metal scales and leather, and their weapons hung at their sides. Every one of them stared at the humans with expressions that seemed to say they were not impressed. "So," rumbled High Warrior Zexthor, his voice so deep it seemed to shake the floor, "these are the famous humans we have heard about. You look even smaller than I expected." Claire stopped in front of the throne and tried to remember everything she had learned about Cathara customs. She did not bow because bowing was seen as weakness. Instead, she stood straight and looked directly at the alien leader. "Great High Warrior Zexthor," she said, "we come from Earth to offer friendship and partnership between our peoples." The big alien leaned forward on his throne. "Friendship," he said, and several of the other Cathara made sounds that might have been laughter. "What could weak creatures like you offer to the mighty Kithara nation?" Claire felt her heart beating fast, but she kept her voice steady. "We offer knowledge, technology, and the chance to learn from each other." "Knowledge?" Zexthor stood up from his throne, and Lisa realized just how huge he really was. "What knowledge do you have that we need?" "We know how to fight. We know how to hunt. We know how to survive. What else matters?" Dr. Jake Sullivan stepped forward. "With respect, Great Warrior, we humans have learned to survive on many different worlds. We have lived in deserts, icelands, underwater cities, and even in space itself. We are good at adapting to new situations." This seemed to catch Zexthor's attention. His ears, which had been flat against his head, perked up slightly. "Adaptation," he said slowly. "This is a skill we value. But survival is about strength and fighting ability. You humans look soft and weak." "We may not be the strongest," Jake continued, "but we have survived by learning to solve problems in new ways. Sometimes the best solution is not always the most obvious one." One of the other Kithara warriors, a female with dark fur, stepped forward. "I am Commander Vixtra," she said. "I have heard that humans do not even teach their young to fight. How do such weak children grow up to be useful adults?" Dr. Kate Williams answered this time. "We teach our children many things. We teach them to think, to create, to work together, and to solve problems peacefully. Fighting is not the only way to be strong." Commander Vixtra snorted. "Peaceful problem solving. This sounds like the talk of cowards." "Perhaps," said Kate calmly, "but it has helped us build a civilization that spans many star systems. We have made friends with dozens of different alien races." High Warrior Zexthor walked down from his throne and circled around the human group. Lisa could smell his wild scent and hear his claws clicking on the stone floor. "You speak of making friends," he said, "but the galaxy is full of enemies. How do you protect yourselves if you do not fight?" Ben Parker spoke up. "We do fight when we must, Great Warrior, but we have learned that making enemies into friends is often better than destroying them." "Impossible," growled another Cathara warrior. "Enemies cannot become friends. The weak serve the strong or they die." Claire tried a different approach. "Great High Warrior, may I ask about your own challenges? Even the strongest leaders must face difficult problems." Zexthor stopped walking and looked at her with interest. "You want to know about our challenges? Very well. The Cathara face no enemies we cannot defeat. Our warriors are the finest in the galaxy. Our weapons are the sharpest. Our cubs grow up to be the bravest fighters. Your cubs, said Kate thoughtfully. How do you train them? From birth, Zexthor said with pride. As soon as they can walk, they learn to fight. As soon as they can run, they learn to hunt. By the time they reach adulthood, they are perfect warriors. Jake nodded respectfully. That sounds like an excellent system. You must be very proud of your young ones. I am, Zexthor replied. Though. He paused and seemed to consider whether to continue. Though what, great warrior? Claire asked gently. Zexthor looked around at his other warriors, then back at the humans. Though sometimes even perfect systems have small problems that are difficult to solve. Commander Vixtra stepped closer to her leader. High warrior, perhaps these matters should not be discussed with outsiders. But Zexthor held up a large hand to silence her. No. If these humans claim to be good problem solvers, perhaps they should hear about a problem that has puzzled our greatest minds. Lisa felt excitement growing in her chest. This might be the chance they needed to prove human worth to these proud aliens. We would be honored to hear about any challenge facing the Cathara, Claire said carefully. Zexthor was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke. The cubs of my personal guard have developed a difficulty. They are strong and brave, as all Kithara young should be. They train hard during the day and show great promise as future warriors, but they have begun refusing their rest periods. Refusing to rest? Kate asked. For the past several months, these 6 cubs will not sleep when they are supposed to. They remain awake all night, running around, making noise, and disturbing the other warriors. This affects their training and makes them tired during the day. Commander Vixtra added, We have tried everything. Extra combat training to tire them out. Meditation exercises to calm their minds. Even herbs that usually make cubs sleepy. Nothing works. Zexthor looked directly at Claire. If you humans are truly good at solving problems, perhaps you can succeed where our greatest warriors have failed. Claire exchanged glances with her team. This was not the kind of diplomatic challenge they had expected, but it might be exactly the opportunity they needed. We would be happy to try, great warrior, she said. Could we meet these cubs and observe their behavior? Zexthor smiled, showing his sharp teeth. Very well. But when you fail, as you surely will, you must admit that humans are too weak to be useful allies to the Kithara. Lisa felt nervous but also excited. Their entire mission now depended on solving a problem with alien children who refused to go to sleep. High Warrior Zexthor led the human team through long stone corridors decorated with battle scenes carved into the walls. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the high ceilings as they walked deeper into the fortress. Lisa Monroe could hear distant sounds of training exercises and the clash of weapons from other parts of the building. The cubs belong to my most trusted warriors, Zexthor explained as they walked. Each one has shown great promise in combat training. But this sleeping problem has lasted for 3 months now, and it grows worse each day. Dr. Kate Williams listened carefully. How old are these cubs, great warrior? Between 5 and 8 of your human years, he replied. Old enough to begin serious warrior training, but still young enough to need proper rest for healthy growth. They reached a large training room with high windows that let in the afternoon light. The floor was covered with soft mats and wooden practice weapons hung on the walls. In the center of the room, 6 young Kithara were running around in circles, chasing each other and making loud growling sounds. Lisa stared at the cubs in amazement. Even though they were children, they were already bigger than human adults. Their fur was fluffier than their parents', making them look like oversized kittens, but their claws and teeth were already sharp and dangerous. Cubs, called Commander Vixtra in a stern voice, come meet our visitors. The 6 young Kithara stopped running and gathered in a line, but Lisa could see they were having trouble standing still. Their tails twitched constantly, their ears moved back and forth, and their bright eyes darted around the room looking for something interesting to do. This is Kex, Zexthor said, pointing to the largest cub. He is the oldest and strongest of the group. Kex was golden like his leader, with amber eyes that seemed to glow with energy. He looked at the humans with curiosity, but also with the proud expression of a young warrior. Here is Vex, Zexthor continued, indicating a slightly smaller cub with darker fur. She is the fastest runner and the best climber. Vex bounced on her feet as if she could not wait to start running again. Her ears were perked up and constantly moving, listening to every sound in the room. This is Zara, the High Warrior said. pointing to a female cub with silver streaks in her black fur. She has the sharpest claws and the best hunting instincts. Zara practiced swatting at invisible prey with her small but deadly claws. Even though she was trying to stand still, her whole body seemed ready to pounce at any moment. "Here we have Nyx," Zexthor said, indicating a cub with the darkest fur of all. "He can move more quietly than any adult warrior," Nyx demonstrated by taking a few steps without making any sound at all. His yellow eyes watched the humans with intense interest, as if he was trying to figure out how they worked. "This is Rex," Zexthor continued, pointing to a cub with bright golden fur and white patches. "He has the loudest roar and the bravest heart." Rex puffed out his chest proudly and made a small roaring sound that was actually quite impressive for someone so young. "And finally, this is Pip," Zexthor said, his voice becoming slightly gentler. "She is the youngest and smallest, but she has the quickest mind of all." Pip was indeed much smaller than the others, but her bright green eyes seemed to take in everything around her. She looked at each human carefully as if she was memorizing their faces. "They are magnificent cubs," Claire said honestly. "You must be very proud of them." "I am," Zexthor replied. "But watch what happens when we try to make them rest." Commander Vixtra stepped forward. "Cubs, it is time for your afternoon rest period. Lie down on the mats and close your eyes." The reaction was immediate. All 6 cubs started complaining loudly in their growling language. Keck shook his head firmly. Vex started pacing back and forth. Zara began practicing her hunting movements. Nyx disappeared into the shadows near the wall. Rex roared his displeasure, and little Pip just sat down and crossed her arms stubbornly. "You see?" Zexthor said with frustration. "They simply refuse to rest no matter what we do." Dr. Jake Sullivan watched the cubs carefully. "Have you tried making them very tired with extra exercise?" "Many times," Commander Vixtra answered. "We have run them until they can barely walk, but still they will not sleep when rest time comes." Ben Parker noticed something interesting. They seem to have a lot of energy, but also a lot of curiosity. Look how they keep examining everything in the room. It was true. Even while they were being stubborn about resting, the cubs kept looking around, sniffing things and investigating every corner of the room. Their minds seemed as active as their bodies. Dr. Kate Williams knelt down to get closer to the cubs' level. "May I try talking to them?" she asked. Zexthor nodded. "You may try, but they do not listen to words about sleeping." Kate approached slowly and sat on one of the mats. The cubs gathered around her, their curiosity stronger than their wariness. She noticed that up close, their eyes were not just bright with energy, but also with intelligence. "Hello," she said softly. "I am Kate. I come from a place called Earth." The cubs looked at each other and made small questioning sounds. Pip, the smallest one, came closest and sniffed Kate's hand. "On Earth," Kate continued, "we have young ones too. They are called children. Sometimes our children also have trouble resting." Kex tilted his head. "What do you do when they will not sleep?" he asked in careful but clear speech. Kate smiled. This was the first time any of the cubs had spoken directly to the humans. "We have found ways to help their minds become calm and peaceful." "How?" asked Vex, bouncing with curiosity. "Well," Kate said thoughtfully, "sometimes we tell them stories." The cubs looked confused. "What are stories?" asked Zara. Kate realized that Cathara culture probably did not include storytelling for entertainment. "Stories are like dreams that we share with words. They are adventures that happen in our imagination." "Imagination?" Rex asked. "What is imagination?" Dr. Jake Sullivan came closer. "I think I understand the problem," he said quietly to his teammates. "These cubs are very intelligent, but their culture only exercises their bodies. Their minds are hungry for something more." Captain Lisa Monroe nodded. "Their brains need stimulation just like their muscles need exercise." "Cubs," Kate said gently, "would you like to hear about an adventure that happened to a brave animal on my world?" All 6 cubs immediately sat down and looked at her with bright, interested eyes. For the first time since the humans had met them, the young Cathara were completely still and focused. Zexthor stared in amazement. "How did you do that?" "They never sit still for anyone." Kate looked up at the towering alien leader. "Sometimes the mind needs food just as much as the body does, great warrior. Perhaps these cubs are not refusing to rest because they are being difficult." Perhaps they are refusing because their minds are still hungry for something they have never been given. Commander Vixtra stepped closer. You think you can make them sleep with these stories? I think it is worth trying, Kate replied. May I have permission to attempt this with your cubs? Zexthor looked at his warriors, then at the cubs who were still sitting quietly and waiting to hear about the adventure Kate had mentioned. He had never seen them so calm and attentive. Very well, he said finally. Try your human methods. But when you fail, you must admit that your peaceful ways are useless against real problems. Kate smiled and pulled out a small tablet from her bag. Then let me tell you about a dog named Buck, who lived in a place where the ground was always covered with snow. Dr. Kate Williams sat cross-legged on the soft mat in the center of the training room. The 6 Kythera cubs formed a circle around her, their bright eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that reminded her of human children waiting for their favorite bedtime story. High Warrior Zexthor and Commander Vixtra stood behind the cubs watching with skeptical expressions. The other adult Kythera warriors had also gathered to see what the strange human female would do with their most energetic youngsters. Before I begin, Kate said softly, I want to explain something to the great warriors watching us. She looked up at Zexthor. On Earth, we discovered long ago that young minds need to be fed just like young bodies. Stories give the imagination something to work with, and when the imagination is satisfied, the mind can finally rest. Imagination is weakness, grumbled one of the adult warriors. Cubs should think only of fighting and survival. Kate nodded respectfully. I understand why you might think that. But imagination is not about escaping reality. It is about understanding it better. The story I am going to tell is about survival, hunting, and becoming strong. She turned back to the cubs who had been listening to every word. This story comes from my world, about a creature who was both tame and wild, and who had to choose which life was truly his own. Kate opened her tablet and found the story she wanted. This is called The Call of the Wild, and it is about a dog named Buck. What is a dog? Asked Little Pip, her green eyes sparkling with curiosity. A dog is an animal that looks a bit like you, but smaller and with no claws, Kate explained. Some dogs live with humans as friends and helpers. Others live wild in the forests. The cubs made interested sounds. The idea of an animal that could be both tame and wild seemed to fascinate them. Buck was a big, strong dog who lived in a warm place with humans who loved him, Kate began, her voice taking on the rhythm that human parents had used for thousands of years. He had never known hunger or cold or danger. He was happy and comfortable. Kex, the oldest cub, frowned. If he was comfortable, how could he become strong? That is exactly what Buck had to learn, Kate said with a smile. One day, men took Buck far away from his comfortable home, to a land covered with snow and ice where the wind howled like a wolf and the cold could kill. The cubs leaned closer. Even though the training room was warm, they seemed to feel the cold of Buck's new world. The men put Buck in a harness with other dogs, and they had to pull heavy sleds across the frozen ground. Buck had never worked so hard in his life. His feet became sore, his muscles ached, and he was hungrier than he had ever been. Vex's tail twitched with sympathy. Poor Buck. Did he give up? No. Kate continued, her voice growing stronger. Buck discovered something inside himself that he had never known was there. The blood of wild wolves flowed in his veins, and the harsh land woke up that wildness. Dr. Jake Sullivan watched from the side as the cubs became more and more absorbed in the story. Their energetic movements had slowed down, and their breathing was becoming deeper and more regular. Buck learned to fight other dogs for food, Kate went on. He learned to sleep in the snow without freezing. He learned to find his way across the wilderness using only his nose and his instincts. Like a true warrior, Rex said approvingly, though his voice was getting softer. Yes, exactly like a warrior, Kate agreed. But Buck also learned something else. He learned that the strongest choice is not always the most obvious one. Captain Lisa Monroe noticed that Zara had curled up on her mat, still listening but with her eyes half closed. The rhythm of Kate's voice and the engaging story were working exactly as they had hoped. Buck met a human who was kind to him. Kate continued. This man treated Buck with respect and love, not fear or cruelty. For the first time, Buck had to choose between his wild nature and his loyalty to a friend. "What did he choose?" whispered Nix, who had moved closer to Kate during the story. "Buck chose loyalty," Kate said softly. "He stayed with his human friend and protected him from danger. But deep in the forest, Buck could hear the voices of wild wolves calling to him, singing the ancient songs of the wilderness." Little Pip yawned widely, showing her sharp little teeth. She curled up against Kate's leg, her purring barely audible. "The wolves accepted Buck as their brother," Kate continued, her voice now almost a whisper. "He learned to hunt with the pack, to howl at the moon, and to run free through the endless forest." Ben Parker watched in amazement as one by one the cubs settled into comfortable positions on their mats. Their eyelids were growing heavy, and their constant movement had stopped completely. But Buck never forgot the lessons he learned about loyalty and friendship. Kate went on. "He became the strongest of all the wolves, not just because of his size and power, but because he understood both worlds, the world of comfort and the world of wildness." Kex, who had been fighting sleep the longest, finally lay down on his mat. His amber eyes were still fixed on Kate, but they were slowly closing. "In the end," Kate whispered, "Buck became the greatest leader the wolf pack had ever known. He was strong because he had been both tame and wild. He was wise because he had experienced both comfort and hardship. He was brave because he had learned to choose his own path." The room had become very quiet. All 6 cubs were now lying peacefully on their mats, their breathing slow and deep. Little Pip was sound asleep against Kate's leg, purring softly like a contented kitten. And when the other wolves told stories around their campfires, Kate concluded in the softest whisper, they always spoke of Buck, the great leader who proved that true strength comes from understanding yourself and choosing your own destiny. Vex's eyes finally closed completely. Rex's tail stopped twitching. Nix's ears relaxed against his head. Zara's claws retracted into their sheaths, and Kex, the proud leader of the cubs, let out a long, peaceful sigh as sleep finally claimed him. The training room was silent except for the gentle sound of 6 sleeping cubs and the soft whisper of Kate closing her tablet. High Warrior Zexthor stared at the scene in complete disbelief. His mouth was slightly open, and his usually fierce expression had been replaced by wonder. Commander Vikstra stepped forward and looked down at the peacefully sleeping cubs. "How?" she whispered. "How did you do what our strongest warriors could not?" Kate stood up carefully, trying not to disturb little Pip. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the gentlest approach is the strongest one." These cubs were not being difficult. They were being intelligent. Their minds needed something to think about before they could rest. Dr. Jake Sullivan approached the group of sleeping cubs. "Their brains were hungry," he explained. "Physical exercise feeds the body, but stories feed the imagination. When both are satisfied, natural sleep can finally come." Ambassador Claire Peterson smiled at the amazed expressions on the adult Cathera faces. "This is one of humanity's oldest discoveries," she said. "Stories do not make us weak. They make us complete." High Warrior Zexthor looked from the sleeping cubs to the small human woman who had accomplished the impossible. For the first time since the humans had arrived, he began to think that maybe these strange visitors were not as weak as they appeared. The Great Hall of Claws had never been so quiet. High Warrior Zexthor sat on his bone throne, staring at the human delegation with an expression that no one had ever seen on his face before. It was not anger or contempt or even curiosity. It was something much rarer for a Kithera warrior. It was respect. 3 hours had passed since Dr. Kate Williams had put the 6 cubs to sleep with her story about Buck the dog. The cubs were still sleeping peacefully in the training room, watched over by amazed Kithera guards who could not believe what they had witnessed. "Explain this to me again," Zexthor said slowly. "Your people use stories to help young ones rest?" Ambassador Claire Peterson nodded. "Stories are one of our most important tools for raising healthy children. They teach lessons, exercise the imagination, and help young minds process their experiences. But stories are not real," Commander Vikstra protested. "How can unreal things have real effects?" Dr. Jake Sullivan stepped forward. With respect, Commander, stories may be imaginary, but their effects are very real. When we tell stories to children, their brains create pictures and emotions. This mental activity satisfies the mind's need for stimulation, which allows the body to finally rest. Captain Lisa Monroe added, "We have learned that minds and bodies must both be cared for. A warrior who exercises only muscles but never thoughts will not reach full potential." Zexthor leaned forward on his throne. "You're saying that our cubs needed mental exercise as much as physical exercise?" "Yes, great warrior," Kate replied. "Your cubs are very intelligent. Their minds were hungry for something to think about. When they did not get mental stimulation during the day, their thoughts kept them awake at night." Engineer Ben Parker pulled out his tablet and showed it to the gathered Cathara. "We have thousands of stories from our world. Some are about brave warriors like your people. Others are about exploration, problem-solving, and adventure. All of them exercise the mind." A younger Cathara warrior stepped forward. "But how do we know these stories will not make our cubs weak?" "We have always taught them that only strength and fighting matter." Kate smiled gently. "The story I told today was about Buck choosing between comfort and wildness. He became stronger by understanding both worlds, not by knowing only one. Stories can teach strength in many different ways." "Tell me more about this, Buck," Zexthor commanded. "Why did he choose to become wild?" "Because," Kate explained, "Buck discovered that true strength comes from choosing your own path, not from following what others expect. He learned to be loyal to friends, brave in danger, and wise in leadership. These are warrior qualities, but they came from understanding himself, not just from physical training." The High Warrior was quiet for several minutes, thinking deeply. Finally he spoke. "For 3 months our greatest fighters could not solve the problem of sleepless cubs. You humans solved it in one afternoon with nothing but words." "Not just words," Dr. Jake corrected respectfully. "Understanding. We watched the cubs and saw that they needed something their culture did not provide. We offered what was missing." Commander Vixtra looked troubled. "Are you saying our way of raising cubs is wrong?" "Not wrong," Claire said carefully. "Incomplete. Your cubs are learning to be strong in body and brave in heart. That is excellent. But they also need to be strong in mind and wise in spirit. Stories can teach all of these things," Kate added. "We have stories about warriors who win battles through cleverness instead of strength. We have stories about leaders who unite enemies through understanding. We have stories about explorers who discover new worlds through curiosity." Zexthor stood up from his throne and began pacing, his claws clicking on the stone floor. "You are telling me that humans have spent thousands of years developing mental training methods that we have ignored?" "Yes," Ben replied honestly. "But you have spent thousands of years developing physical training methods that we could learn from. This is why different peoples should work together. Our cubs could be stronger than ever," Lisa suggested, "if they learned both Cathara fighting skills and human thinking skills." The idea seemed to excite several of the younger warriors. One of them spoke up. "High Warrior, perhaps we could have exchange programs. Human teachers could come here and our cubs could visit Earth." "Impossible," growled an older warrior. "Cathara cubs cannot leave their homeworld during training." "Then perhaps," Kate suggested, "we could start here. I could teach some of your people how to tell stories that fit Cathara values. Stories about honor, courage, and strength, but also about wisdom and understanding." Zexthor stopped pacing and looked directly at Kate. "You would do this? You would stay on our world and teach our methods to our people?" "I would be honored," Kate replied. "If the mighty Cathara people would accept a human teacher, what would you want in return?" Commander Vixtra asked suspiciously. Claire smiled. "Friendship, trade agreements, the chance for our peoples to learn from each other. Humans are always eager to discover new ways of thinking and living. And," added Jake, "perhaps some of your warriors could visit Earth and teach us about survival and combat skills. Our people would benefit from Cathara knowledge just as yours might benefit from ours." Zexthor returned to his throne and sat down heavily. "This is not what I expected when I agreed to meet with humans." "What did you expect, great warrior?" Lisa asked. "I expected to prove that you were too weak to be useful allies," he admitted. "I thought you would fail to solve our problem and then I could dismiss you with honor." "And now?" Claire inquired. Zexthor looked toward the training room where the cubs were still sleeping peacefully. "Now I think that perhaps strength comes in many forms. Physical strength, yes, but also mental strength, emotional strength, the strength to admit when others know something you do not." Commander Vixtra stepped closer to her leader. High Warrior, are you considering an alliance with the humans? I am considering, Zexthor replied slowly, the possibility that our cubs could become the greatest warriors in the galaxy if they learned both to fight like Kithara and to think like humans. An excited murmur ran through the gathered warriors. The idea of making their already impressive cubs even stronger was very appealing. There is one condition, Zexthor announced. Kate Williams must remain here as our first human story keeper. She will teach our people how to use stories for training young minds. Kate bowed respectfully. I accept, Great Warrior, if my government agrees to this assignment. And, Zexthor continued, we will send our finest young warriors to Earth to learn human methods of problem-solving and adaptation. Claire felt excitement building in her chest. This was going far better than anyone had hoped. I believe both our governments will be very pleased with this arrangement. Furthermore, the High Warrior said, standing up again, we will establish a new tradition. Every night all Kethra cubs will hear stories before sleep. Stories of warriors and heroes, but also stories of wisdom and friendship. Ben Parker grinned. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship between our peoples. 6 months later, Dr. Kate Williams stood in the same training room where she had first met the cubs. But now it looked very different. Comfortable mats were arranged in a circle, and the walls were decorated with pictures of both Earth animals and Kithra heroes. The same 6 cubs sat waiting for their nightly story, but they had grown taller and stronger. More importantly, they had grown wiser. Their days were still filled with combat training, but now they also learned about different worlds, different ways of solving problems, and different kinds of courage. Tonight, Kate announced, I have a special story about a human explorer who visited a planet full of dangerous creatures and learned to become friends with them. The cubs leaned forward eagerly. Little Pip, who was not so little anymore, raised her hand. Is this a true story, Storykeeper Kate? Kate smiled. It is the truest story I know because it is the story of how we all met each other. As she began to tell the tale of the human delegation's visit to Kithra, Kate reflected on how much had changed. The cubs now fell asleep easily every night, their minds satisfied by adventure and wonder. Young Kithara warriors were learning to solve problems creatively. And far away on Earth, human children were learning Kithara lessons about courage and determination. The galaxy had become a little bit smaller and a lot more interesting, all because 6 cubs had refused to sleep until someone gave their minds the food they craved. And in the Great Hall of Claws, High Warrior Zexthor kept a new treasure among his weapons and trophies, a simple tablet containing thousands of stories from across the galaxy, proof that sometimes the gentlest strength was the most powerful of all.